Today I wanted to talk about when it's right to rotate goalkeepers. I guess this has come up recently as Arsenal have dropped Aaron Ramsdale in place of David Raya. They brought him in over the summer, they've signed him from Brentford, and it's caused quite a large debate now about whether the move is correct. Aaron Ramsdale's played the first 4 games of the season for Arsenal, and then on the weekend Mikel Arteta replaced him with David Raya and has since played David Raya again in the Champions League. I guess this sparks a debate because a lot of people are saying, we obviously know that the goalkeeping position itself is very different to that of all the other positions on the football pitch. However, there's been a lot of pundits that have come out and supported Arteta and a lot have done quite the opposite. So I guess I wanted to put my opinion out there and maybe gauge some of the wider opinion and how everyone feels about it. Typically, competition for places is obviously a good thing. It means players can't be too lazy, or maybe it stops them from dropping their standard in training. They have to kind of be on it every week, because if they're not, they've got someone ready to come in who's fighting for a place in the team. Because previously you might have a top striker, a top centre mid, top winger, whatever it is. They might have a few good games, have a few bad games, and their position's kind of safe. Whereas the minute you kind of get a decent replacement there, they're kind of forced. And the minute they drop down, you've got a guy ready to go. And then the team is always going to get the best outcome on the pitch. The manager's always going to pick the best players that week. But anyway, I guess this comes up as the goalkeeping position is very different. Like I said, it's very much a reactive position. The goalkeeper's kind of a lot of the game in a naive way. It seems like they're doing a whole lot of nothing, and then they're kind of forced into the game as a reaction of what else is happening. Obviously the other team might have an attack, they're forced to make a save. Depending on how good the team is and what is happening, they might be uninvolved for quite a majority of the game. So that in itself creates a lot of difficulties. But the other thing that I guess is associated quite strongly with the goalkeeper is that their mistakes are very costly. You know, how many times can a striker take a shot and miss, or take a bad touch, or misplace a pass, or whatever it might be further up the field? You've got a lot of lines of defense behind you that if you make a mistake, you can get out of trouble from that afterwards. Whereas the centre backs can be quite costly, but I'd say goalkeepers even more so. So the minute you make a mistake at that level and in that position, it's almost likely going to lead in a goal. You know, if you don't control the ball correctly, you make a misjudgment, you give the ball away, you've obviously not going to have a defender in front of you, whatever it might be. So that in itself, it's a very cruel position, because you see goalkeepers do so many things right, game after game, and the minute they make one mistake, it leads to a goal, and it could cost them a game and things like that. So that element's quite rough. But these things, I guess in particular with the position, you now, as a result of that, you're going to associate it with a lot of confidence. You know, when you've got a confident keeper, someone who's backing themselves, doing all the right things, there's an element of concentration. Maybe when they start doubting themselves, if they've had a bad game previously, or even a bad mistake in a game in particular, it might lead to even more mistakes. You know, it's almost like a striker when they're missing a lot of chances. It just feels like that's going to go on and on and on, whereas a player with confidence just grows bigger and bigger. I guess the famous thing about that, as a Liverpool fan, one that springs to mind immediately is Karius in the Champions League final against Real Madrid. He obviously gave the ball away straight away to Benzema, which is a terrible mistake to make as a goalkeeper. Immediately cost them a goal. Liverpool are then behind, and later on you could just see his confidence was completely rocked. We saw after that Gareth Bale scoring from long range. You know, the ball obviously swerved and whatnot, but a keeper at that level, you'd expect to be able to make a save, but he ends up conceding to what looks maybe is quite a normal save, or at least be able to parry it. Gareth Bale arguably only takes that shot on because he's confident after his goal, and he knows Karius is on the opposite end of the scale after the first one. But anyways, I guess this is kind of blown up a lot. I've seen myself, the pundits, the likes of Jamie Carragher and Peter Schmeichel arguing over the Champions League coverage. You know, Schmeichel, as a former goalkeeper himself, is kind of going to be maybe anti this decision. Well, it definitely seemed like he was, and the fact that he was saying there should be a defined number one goalkeeper and his spot should be safe, and then obviously from there you'll have a backup keeper for the likes of injuries. And a lot of what other clubs do when they do have obviously a first choice keeper and a backup, they might have the first choice for Premier League games, Champions League, and maybe throw in the second goalkeeper for maybe some of the cup games, just to give them that game time and a bit of experience. You obviously want the keeper to get better, but it's about rotation. And like I said before about the position being a little bit more unique, is a midfielder that's playing 90 minutes is going to need quite the recovery period, whereas a goalkeeper, they can have quite a tough game and whatnot, but they're obviously not running around as much. It's probably a bit less fatiguing on the body, so it's not necessarily a position you have to rotate based on busy fixture periods and busy schedules and things like that. But the quote kind of got thrown around that keepers don't get rotated, they get dropped. So if you're Aaron Ramsdale and you've played 4 Premier League games and all of a sudden the 5th game, David Raya comes in and you're no longer selected, yeah, that's definitely a demotion. I mean, that seems to be the way about it. There's certain players you might pick for certain games, you know, the way you want to play as a team, you're versing different oppositions that play different ways. So, you know, this midfielder might be better for this game and this defender might be better for this type of game, this striker. It goes on. Whereas the keeper, I think, maybe naively is a position that shouldn't really change too much. Nowadays, keepers are expected to do a lot more in terms of the ball at their feet. I think we've seen a lot of goalkeepers kind of come and go of late that have kind of these better attributes. You know, United have just signed Onana ahead of David Raya, who for a long time I would have said was the best goalkeeper in the Premier League, maybe from about, you know, early teens to maybe, you know, late teens, maybe a 5-year period there. You know, he nearly got a move to Real Madrid and that famously broke down, but they've brought in a goalkeeper that can play with their feet and is meant to be a lot better playing out from the back. As well as famously, Pep Guardiola came into Man City. We all know that he likes to play a very high possession-based style, the whole tiki-taka. A lot of guys who were great on the ball. He quickly got rid of Joe Hart, who he deemed was not good enough. He was England's #1 goalkeeper at the time, had won the previous Premier League titles with them. Everyone would have said he was one of the best keepers there are, but Pep deemed that he wasn't good enough to play with his feet, and that obviously didn't suit the style of play he wanted to do. Brought in Claudio Bravo from Barcelona, meant to be great with his feet, and I guess had a bit of a nightmare season, really didn't work out. And then so quickly after that again, he's brought in Edison, who, you know, you'd have to say is probably the best goalkeeper in the game with his feet. He's absolutely unreal. You see the composure. Already he doesn't really have to do too much in terms of saving, and his main role at Man City, because they are so dominant, is just kind of pass the ball around and be good. So that's essential that he's good in that sense, and he's absolutely off the scale, I would say, as a goalkeeper. So yeah, if you're playing a team where you think you might get more possession, obviously you might expect your goalkeeper to be on the ball a bit more, but at this level it's probably not a substitution you would make or a change where you'd go, oh, okay, this goalkeeper of ours is slightly better and we're versing maybe a weaker team, so we'll play him. I think it's a bit rough. You probably want to have a goalkeeper that you want for every game. So I guess I would side more with Peter Schmeichel and those saying that you should have a #1. As much as you're competing for places, the minute you take the goalkeeper out, I think you have to kind of have the conversation with him in the sense that you're underperforming in these moments, and that's the reason why. Because I don't really see it necessary to change a goalkeeper within the one competition for any other reason other than the fact that maybe there's a drop in form and you're going to bring a guy in straight away. Because at the end of the day, everything you do is to win football games. So if one keeper's not doing too well, you've got the other guy straight to come in. The same way you would if your striker's not scoring. It can be a little bit tough, and obviously you bring minutes in for different players and bring off the bench. It's hard to expect them to come on and have that immediate impact and things like that. But in every other position, they say competition is very healthy because people get pushed and they are forced to deliver, and everyone's standards immediately go up because no one's becoming lazy. And I would deem goalkeeper to be the exact same. But in saying that, I think it is quite tough because goalkeepers, like I said, it's a very confidence position. Anything you do or any small mistake you make can lead to a goal, or anything you do, it's going to have quite an adverse effect. So it's pretty rough, but I definitely think there needs to be a defined #1, because going into any competition, you want to say this is the main guy that we're going to use. But again, if he comes out of the team, I think it makes a strong statement that he's had a drop in form and he's no longer good enough. If you've got 2 goalkeepers constantly rotating, which I seem to remember Liverpool doing that again in the build-up to that Champions League final where we did play Karius in goal that game I mentioned. It felt like all season him and Mignolet were rotating. They were both having quite poor seasons, making quite big mistakes, and it just kind of seemed like we were just looking for whoever was the best of a bad bunch, really. And then straight away after that final, we go and sign Alisson. It was quite an obvious position that we needed to improve on. But if you're Arsenal and you come second in the Premier League, your goal is obviously to try push that one step further and maybe win it this season. They had Aaron Ramsdale and they've gone out and signed another Premier League keeper, which is a bit of a big statement. It's not like, okay, we're going to bring in Brentford's goalkeeper and just sit him #2. It will be there to push Ramsdale and say, okay, we need you at this level now, and there's no room for you to drop below it. We saw United do that when they signed Henderson and they had De Gea and Henderson there, and De Gea just held the spot and Henderson wasn't getting a game, and he's had to leave and look for other moves to get minutes because he's just sitting there. I think the idea of rotating a goalkeeper week on week does seem a bit crazy at this point in time. I mean, going forward, it might be something that everyone starts to do, but again, I don't think it's good for a goalkeeper. If you're a goalkeeper coming in for one game and you're thinking, yeah, I might not be playing the next game, I didn't play the last one, maybe your confidence will be up and down, and it's a position that's going to be heavily impacted by how you're feeling and the confidence that you're having. Anyone who, I guess, when you see youth players kind of come into the team or new signings, everyone's always saying give them time, let them settle, give them a run of games, or even when someone comes back from injury and it's like, okay, they're not quite match fit, let them play a few games, get them up to speed, things like that. Sometimes it can take having just a run of games consecutively to kind of, get yourself in the swing of things, get a feel for the pace, especially in a certain league or a certain competition where teams are playing a certain way. You just need to get in the routine of playing these games and knowing what you're doing. Because if you're constantly in and out of the team, I think that's really tough no matter what position you are in. I guess that's been my thoughts. I guess on some situations there, I've kind of sat on the bench and kind of cited, there's pros and cons on both elements. Overall, I guess I would have to say that I believe that there should be a defined number one. Competition's obviously always good, but yeah, the minute you get dropped as a goalkeeper in the Premier League, as Aaron Ramsdale's done, I definitely would deem that you've been dropped and you're not just on rotation and you're just going to miss this game for whatever reason. You've got these attributes. I think it's much of a muchness at that level in terms of goalkeeper attributes, and it's just going to maybe have a negative effect in my opinion. I think both goalkeepers are going to be unsure about what the plan is, and they want to know you're going to be playing all these games in this competition or all these games in this competition. And fair enough, if a goalkeeper is having an absolute shocker of a season and you do need the points no matter what you're doing, challenging for top four, going for titles, trying to avoid relegation, it might be time to rotate the keeper. But yeah, the minute you do that as a manager, it's a massive statement and it's going to really shake up that goalkeeper himself, and there's obviously a lot of issues that come on from there. But anyways, yeah, I just want to get my thoughts out. This seemed to be a bit of a trending topic. Definitely, if you have an opinion on that, chuck it in the comments below. Give the video a like if you've enjoyed it and want to see other videos similar to that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. It really helps us out. But anyways, that's all for today. I've been Ant. This has been Red Mate. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.